Southgate have done, is if they spent years trying to cultivate something to come to fruition down the line when they set up the kind of, the George's Centre, the football excellence thing about 10 years ago. And in many ways, that's like what you've done at Spirit of Yorkshire. You've laid the groundwork all those years ago to see this
You're
whiskey
like a
come to fruition tonight.
you're like a radio DJ with that segue there. That Luke, that's a 10 out of 10 segue there. Yeah, yeah, not dissimilar, I suppose. Not sure quite if that's the case. Should we start cracking on with some
I think we
whiskey
should
then?
start. Yeah, there was a couple of the last person is joining from the waiting room now. That was actually my fault because when I was doing that eloquent segue, I forgot to admit the last couple of people who had joined a bit
It's a
afterwards.
shame
But
that they missed
they're
it.
on
It's
there
a
now
shame.
though. So apologies. I
Lovely.
think one of them was Lewis. So Lewis, I'm sorry. I should have let you in from the waiting room a tad sooner, but you haven't missed anything. We're all about to start now. So folks, thank you for joining. Thank you everyone for coming in. Great to see the familiar faces. There's actually a few new names on here tonight that possibly I don't want to, we get a lot of people in the W Club and stuff, so maybe apology if you have been on the call before, but this might be your first Digital Dram. So if it is, welcome. My name's Luke. I'm the W Club manager, and yeah, tonight is all about you guys. We want to get as many questions and tasting notes into the chat as usual. And then we'll have a bit of fun. We'll learn a lot about the Spirit of Yorkshire and Filey Bay, and at the end we'll give you out a 15% discount code for all the whiskies sample tonight, so you can purchase. And Morgan, we were just saying before we came on, we've all agreed, and this is exciting news for everyone. So for anyone who purchases more than 2 bottles, if they send me on the Zoom link email at info@wclub.co.uk the order number, we'll send you on a gift voucher for a free tour at Spirit of Yorkshire. So if you purchase 2 bottles, you can get a free tour, and that's redeemable anytime, isn't it, Morgan?
Yeah, yeah. We run tours 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 3 o'clock every day. So yeah, you just need to call up. Just to clarify, it's 2 bottles or more, not more than 2 bottles. I know we're tight here in Yorkshire, but that's a little bit too tight
Yes.
for me.
No, that's true. That's true. That's a good clarification. Yeah, yeah. That is good. So more than 1 bottle is really what I meant, what I should have said,
Yeah.
Continuing the football analogy, it's a 0 0.5 goals or more, like, as they say. But but yeah, no, well, anyway, that's enough for me, I suppose. And I suppose we'll pass it over to you. The one last thing to add is, as everyone's observed, and we would have seen in our promotion for this is obviously live from the distillery, in at the Spirit of Yorkshire. So that's another exciting element. I think a few of you on here might have been on our Tullamore call a couple of years ago, which I think was the last one where we did live from the distillery. And we've had lots of distillery videos and shots, but I think those were the only 2 that have been live from the distillery. I'm sure someone like Steph in there will correct me, some of the regulars, but from my memory, that's about right. But Morgan, before we get tucked into the whiskey, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, gladly. Yeah. So I'm Morgan. I look after UK sales as a whole for Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery, and we produce Filey Bay whiskey. So I've been working for the company it'll be 4 years in January. I've come from a background of hospitality more than anything else. I've been in restaurants and bars, mainly restaurant work, for 15 or 16 years, and then I visited the distillery as a consumer. Although not working in whiskey my whole life, I've drank whiskey my whole life. So I visited the distillery, and then visited again about 6 months later, because where we're located, which I'll go on to talk about in a bit, but where we're located, I've got young children, so right near the sea, really good rock pools, good fish and chips kind of place. So I visited again, and then the third visit was where I spoke to Dave, who's my managing director, who's one of the 2 founders, and we got chatting. And yeah, he referenced there being an opportunity for a sales manager role coming up in the next few months, and so we continued to talk. And yeah, the rest is history. It's been a real pleasure.
Marvelous. No, that's really exciting. And as someone like myself with a hospitality background, I love having someone on who's transitioned from the hospitality front of house into the whiskey trade. We've all tread that same path, Morgan,
Good.
comrades in arms. But the order we want to go in tonight, for everyone who wants to get pre-poured, I'm just going to fire it into the chat. Before I do, if you want to just correct me if I'm wrong. So we're going to go Flagship, IPA finish batch 2, Moscatel, STR, porter or port cask. Is it a porter
Porter, a
cask? Sorry,
porter
not
cask,
port. Yeah,
porter.
porter.
Easily confused though. We've done both, which makes my life a bit of a yeah, but it's a porter cask.
Porter,
Yeah.
and then we'll finish on the peated. I enjoy both, but I must say I drink a lot more porter. You know, but there you go. Maybe that's a cliche being an Irishman.
It's a combination. It's a combination not to mix porter and port. That's something that I can tell you from experience.
I've actually, after saying that, I've actually put port in the chat, so apologies about that. It's porter,
Nice.
not port.
Porter.
There is no
No, it's all
there's
good.
no port in the pack, so no one can be confused by that anyway.
You know you're safe. You're good. There's one that's bright purple.
Yeah, marvelous.
So, shall I tell you guys a little bit about us and as a business and what we're doing? So the first whiskey, for everyone's benefit, if you want to get cracking, this is our flagship whiskey. Now, Luke and I discussed this earlier today, how we both get frustrated with tastings where somebody talks for 20 minutes and you've not tasted a dram. So I'd encourage you to just have a good nose and a small sip of the flagship. I'd consider the flagship, the first sip of any whiskey of any tasting, to be a little bit sacrificial because it's going to have spice and it's going to have some fire that it won't have once your palate's softened. But just get accustomed to that flagship and I'll tell you a bit about it. The flagship's our house single malt whiskey. It is in the same model as our first release, which was October 2019. We've been distilling spirits since June 2016. And our first release was October 2019. So like the first release, the flagship has been matured solely in bourbon casks. The distillate style, or the style of our whiskey as a whole, across the range is light and sweet and fruity. We had the late, great Dr. Jim Swan in from early doors with our spirit production, well, with a whole production in truth. So light, sweet and fruity spirit style is what we're trying to offer. But then with the flagship, we've got our house bourbon matured style, caramel, vanilla, that style is what we're looking for. I just wanted to let everybody know as well, from a format tasting, done a few of these, but we're trying to get better than every time. So we've actually got some pre-recorded footage. Where I'm located is we're in Hunmanby. So for those who aren't familiar with Yorkshire, you're looking at about an hour's drive east of York to the seaside. We're south of Whitby, south of Scarborough on the coast, and Hunmanby itself is about 3 miles inland from Filey Bay. If you look out of the distillery window, you can see the whole of Filey Bay, hence we call it Filey Bay whiskey. So we're going to do this dram, and I'm going to put a video up, which is of our marketing director and daughter of one of the two founders, Tom, Jenny, up at the farm, which is about 2.5 miles that way. She can tell you a little bit about where we came from, which is the fact that we're a field to bottle producer. And then we'll come back to me and I'll waffle through 4 more whiskies and have a chat with you guys and hopefully get some interesting tasting notes and question marks. And then we've got another bit of footage, which is, again, back up at the farm, up our warehouse later on as well, which is our whiskey director, Joe. So if everyone has a flagship in their glass and everyone's had a sniff and a taste, if you're all right for 5 minutes just to hear our marketing director, Jenny, talk about our farm, and then you'll come back to me and we'll talk about flagship and then move on to the IPA finish batch too, if that's cool with everyone.
That sounds like a plan. I realized what we should have done, really, Morgan, is we should have pretended that we're cutting live to her, you know?
Oh, yeah, like the newsreader. Yeah, no, we joked about that, yeah. Yeah, so we'll get cracking on that video now, if that's cool.
Talk to you now a little bit about how the distillery got going. So to do that, I'm going to have to rewind all the way back to the early 2000s when farming was in a really tricky position. Lots of different world events and different things were happening, and that was having a real impact on British agriculture. So farmers were looking at lots of different ways to diversify. There was a time of lots of farm shops being created, butchers, holiday cottages, golf courses, all those sorts of things. And actually Tom and Jill, my parents, who were farming and running the farm at that time, worked together with some family friends from the village, farmers from the nearby village, and they said, we've got barley, we've got water, all we need to do to make beer is add some hops and some yeast. And that's what they did. They got a DEFRA grant, and this is in a nutshell, but they set up the Wold-Top Brewery in 2003. Okay, so then we fast forward another 10 years, Wold-Top Brewery is going really well. There's been a huge craft beer boom. There's a real foodie movement. People are really interested in the authenticity, the provenance of their food and their drink, and they want to know more about where that's come from and the story and the people behind it. So in 2010, 2011, Tom was having a conversation with the local maltsters where we sent all our barley to get malted for the beer. And then he said, what happens to the surplus barley that comes from our farm? And the maltster said, well, it goes up to Scotland to make single malt whiskey. And Tom, ever a Yorkshire farmer with short arms and long pockets, said, well, that's no good. Why can't we just keep it here in Yorkshire? So he spoke to another friend, his best friend Dave, from down in Burton Fleming, and they put their heads together over a pint and a couple of games of rugby and said, well, okay, we've got barley, we've got water now, we've got beer, which actually making beer is very similar to the first stage of making whiskey. Kind of what's stopping us. They did some due diligence. They looked into why no one was making Yorkshire single malt whiskey at that time, and they put a lot of work in. And over the next 3 or 4 years, built the distillery, worked with Dr. Jim Swan, and the idea of Yorkshire single malt whiskey and Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery properly came into being. So whiskey is made from using barley. Now, to get barley to turn it into malt, you've got to grow the stuff. And the Yorkshire Wolds, where we are right now, is a brilliant area for growing malting barley. It's chalky soil, it's really free draining, and that's what barley likes. Barley doesn't like getting its feet wet. It likes it when the water drains straight away. So as you can see behind me, there's lots of fields in the background, and they're predominantly full of fields of barley, of wheat, and a little bit of oilseed rape too. Holding a head of barley, so we know that it's barley because you've got all these lovely awns. So when you see it rippling through the fields, it looks like it's kind of a sea moving along. So that's quite different from wheat. Wheat's much taller, it looks a little bit bluer, barley's much greener, and has that movement within it too. Good. So we're farming in a slightly different way from how you might normally see around the UK at the moment. Rather than cultivating and ploughing the soil and turning over the soil in the fields after each harvest, what we do is after harvest, the combine chops the straw behind it and leaves that on the ground, and we leave it there, and it creates this kind of mulchy humus, and from there we'll direct drill usually a cover crop straight into it. We don't turn the soil over, we're just essentially like running kind of fingers through and bobbing the seeds in there. That cover crop will grow up over the winter and is full of really useful plants like phacelia and clover and radishes. The radishes have long tap roots, and that helps with kind of soil aeration. The phacelia and the phacelia and the clover are really good for catching nitrogen and holding in carbon, and they bring all of those good things in. And then at the end of the year, into the spring, they freeze, they get rolled down, and they create again this another layer of like mulchy humus. And into that we plant our spring barley, directly planted again. So we're never turning over the soil, we're keeping all that carbon locked up, we're keeping all that nitrogen in, we're keeping all the good stuff, lots of earthworms in the soil, really nice and aerated. It's great for drainage, it's great for growing barley, and it's really good for keeping the carbon in as well.
I think mulchy hummus might be one of my favorite descriptions of
Luke,
all time.
I've never heard the word hummus used like that in my life before. I found that quite yeah. In a nutshell, though, in layman's terms and in whiskey terms as well, what Jenny's getting at is we're a field to bottle whiskey distillery. We farm every drop ourselves. It all comes from our farm, and I'm no farmer, as you can see by my soft hands. But from what I've learned in the 3.5 years working here, no-till farming, which is that of not disturbing the soil, is allowing the soil to stay healthy and not be overworked, and thus you get a more continual, greater yield of barley. And furthermore, you're not knackering the environment in the process of making single malt whiskey. In fact, you're doing as much as you can to help draw more carbon out of the atmosphere. That's the general message: consistency, sustainability as a field to bottle whiskey distillery, and control of the whole process.
No, excellent. I mean, that's brilliant. I thought no-till was like all these places moving to cashless after COVID, but this is great.
Yeah.
The Alistair's got some great tasting notes coming in. You're a bit shy tonight, folks. I want to hear your feedback on the whiskey. He says, I get pear drops on the nose with a sherbet effervescent on the palate. I mean, that's a really great tasting note. The sherbet, I can totally get. It's got that kind of it's like citrusy, almost like a lemon posset type sort of. Yeah, I think I used that tasting note in the last tasting, but it was true then and it's true now. It's really interesting. Stefan Serra says pear cake and custard. So I think they're two. Actually, definitely get those orchard fruits at the start as well. Yeah, that pear. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all. I mean, we've mentioned Jim Swan, and I'll talk about distillation. I'll actually take the video around and show you our stills. But there's a few things that we do. That's quite a nice segue into talking about fermentation, which is what I was going to talk about next. But a relatively long fermentation, the wash interestingly, is produced at our brewery, which is our sister site, which is 2.5 miles up the hill on the farm. So Old Top Brewery still exists, still makes beer, and that comes into chat later with the porter and the IPA. But from a fermentation perspective, which is where those lovely pear drop, apple orchard apples, even sweet shop flavors coming from, that's 72 hours of ferment, up to 96 actually, and we're producing 20,000 litres of wash a week up at the brewery, which comes down here genuinely on the back of a tractor on a Monday and a Thursday, and from there we're starting to distill it. So yeah, some lovely tasting notes. I think the custard's great. I think custard's down to bourbon maturation, that vanilla custard richness, and there's that creaminess to it. But then yeah, lemon effervescence, that kind of almost lemon sherbet. I think that's all down to the distillation and those light fruity flavors that I'll show you how and why and where we create them in a while with the spirit, with the distilled we've got surrounding me.
Marvelous. It's really great. We've got some more taste notes coming in there as well. Frank, this is quite sweet and lemon notes. Difficult to pin down the aroma. Maybe stewed pear, definitely pear drops and caramel on the tongue. Ian says fudgy caramel notes with lemon on the nose. I get apple pie and custard. There's a lemony hint to it as well on the nose, says a different Ian. All great tasting notes, folks. Alice says 3 CL is too small, and that's I totally agree. That's why you need to buy a 70 CL bottle after this call. And just before we come on to the distillate bit there, Morgan, I have a question about just going back to that no-till farming. How much, and apologies if this was mentioned and I just missed it, but in terms of, do you still need to do the same level of kind of crop rotation outside each year after a couple of years, or does that allow you to kind of go more at the fields?
Yeah, no, really valid question. Yeah, so it's a 600-acre farm, approximately 500 tons of barley a year grown, and currently a quarter of the farm is nothing but clovers. So yeah, you do rotate. You can't continually plant the same crop every 4 or 5 years or so. We're going to be moving through, but predominantly, well, we've experimented with rapeseed. We've experimented with wheat previously. At some point, I believe there was some sheep on the farm, but we have 2 crops. We plant Laureate and we plant SY Vessel, and with those 2 barleys, they're being SY Vessel being a winter variety, Laureate being a spring variety. So yeah, we're rotating the crops regularly, but with planting cover crops that are fixing the soil effectively, that is less relevant because the earth isn't getting, for lack of a better term, quite as knackered as it would be if you were to plough the land after every harvest of barley.
No, that's fascinating. 600 acres is quite the farm.
Yes.
Mela said pear drops, apple strudel, and lemon. So yeah, there's
it's nice to hear a lot of lemon. Lemons, yeah, I think I agree with the lemoniness. I think it's got a richness and a creaminess, but it's got a freshness which doesn't make it too sickly. I think there's a nice citrusiness there, which helps to keep it quite clean. Just more on the barley. I'd missed out 2 vital things there. Firstly, the barley's malted locally in Bridlington. So for those who are familiar, I could pretty much on a good day throw a rock at Bridlington from here. It's close, and Muntons, who malt it, are the biggest maltster in the northeast of England. They're one of the biggest maltsters for Diageo. In fact, that little bit about, well, most of the barley that wasn't coming back to us for beer was going to Scotland. That was to Diageo, in fact. That's what the maltsters have told us. So yeah, barley grown at our farm, malting floor cleared. Our barley goes in, gets malted, and then comes back to us as one batch, about 500 tons a year. Now, half of that is now still made as beer for Old Top Brewery, and half of that gets turned into wash and then in turn into whiskey. Yeah.
No, fantastic. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty much finished that flagship. Just for those of you who are wondering, it's £65 on our website at the moment, but with the discount at the end, you'll get that for 55. So for a grain to glass whiskey like this, I think that's well worth the money, especially with the discount. So I've been sorry, just before we move on to the flagship, lost my run of myself there. Non-chill filtered and 46%. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah, 46%, no colour, no caramel, non-chill filtered entirely, yeah.
Marvellous.
We'd never be able to chill filter with Jim Swan in this. He was there.
Will we come on to the IPA? Or is there something you wanted to cover first? Or
no, I'd be delighted to talk about the IPA finish, yeah.
Marvelous.
Yeah.
Okay.
So dram number 2 is our IPA finish, batch 2, which is an Indian Pale Ale finish for those who aren't familiar. And funny enough, although I've worked in pubs, it was only about 10 years into working in the trade that I learned what IPA is. So at the brewery, we produce beer. We produce the first beer we made was Walltop Bitter, so 3.7% bitter. We produce lager and pale ale and red ale and stout. The one thing about the brewery, I don't sell their beer, and they don't actually sell our whiskey. We work side by side in a sense of production and growing barley and making booze from it, and we obviously share contacts, but we keep the sales actually quite separate. That being said, it was my 3rd interview with the company that I learned about the Walltop Brewery connection, and it's one of those things that really solidified my want to be a part of this business. I've drank Walltop my whole life, and every pub, restaurant, bar, Michelin-starred restaurant I've involved myself in previously, I've fought to get Walltop in because it's a great classic traditional pint. Now, they don't do a 14% strawberry and watermelon sour, but they do pale and bitter really, really well and consistently well. And that consistency we think is down to a water source that we use, which is 2 boreholes on the farm. The farm doesn't have mains water supply. And the same barley, our barley that we grow. So we've got that consistency there. Now, one of the beers they produce is called Scarborough Fair. It's a 6% IPA. It's delicious. And what we're doing in this example, first of all, and just to cover the label for a minute, is we're producing a whiskey matured beer. So Flagship whiskey casks, one of these, is being filled with Scarborough Fair IPA, which is where the beer will sit for about 9 months. Now, what goes in at 6% during that time is going to be pulling some of the whiskey out of the oak. It's going to re-ferment slightly. It was a very warm summer when it was in the cask. So what actually leaves in that example is an 8.5% beer that's been matured in whiskey casks called Barrel Wave. Now, within an hour of those casks being emptied of beer, we can refill the casks with our bourbon matured spirit, effectively Flagship, which is where the whiskey can sit for a further 5 months to make an IPA finished whiskey, if that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I know the little bit I know about cask finishing beers like this, or cask finishing whiskies in beer casks, is that timing is crucial. The longer the cask sits empty, the worse flavors the whiskey takes on. It's a very difficult one to get right. I'm often very skeptical about beer finishes. But with the by the sounds of things, I mean, with that kind of connection, you've got it down to a fine art. Paula said similar aroma, but more hoppy. While people get their nose into that and see what they think about it, the one thing I know, people in Britain have a complicated relationship with Europe, Morgan, but the 2 things they do well over there is they say Wi-Fi instead of Wi-Fi, which I love, and then they also say IPA instead of IPA. So
cool.
at the times you're in a bar and you go, "Can I get one of those?" And he goes, "Oh yes, the IPA." I'm like, "Yeah, the IPA."
That's fascinating. Yeah. I didn't know this until about 3 years ago, but it's called Indian Pale Ale. Most people will know this, and I'm probably just highlighting my own ignorance, but it's called Indian Pale Ale because it was produced when they shipped beer from England over to India for the troops in India. It didn't last the journey because of the length of journey, and it was a weaker beer. So what they did was they popped a lot more medicinal hops in the beer, hence it was more of a hoppy beer. They made it stronger, and because it was stronger, it would last the journey over the seas to India, and therefore it was an Indian Pale Ale because that's what it was designed for. Most people know that, and they're all just nodding their head on the screen there, I'm sure, but I thought that was quite an interesting fact.
It is interesting.
I think this is...
And most export IPAs back in the day were actually drank in Australia, funnily enough. Another fun IPA.
There you go.
And they recreated it recently, maybe about 10 years ago, because this fella did the journey with a load of beer casks, and apparently it came out like champagne on the other side, like nothing like the IPAs we drink, because crosses the equator, you're going down around Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, and it's in these, it's being rocked by the waves, it's passing massive temperature fluctuations and stuff, and by the time it had actually carbonated into this really weird sort of, apparently gorgeous, but like a wine, and the people, when they popped it open somewhere in India, wherever they landed, the people there were like, "No, this isn't beer. What have you bought?" And he's like, No, this was an IPA going into the barrel before it got on the ship." So it is a fascinating origin as to why we get the hoppy, high ABV beer we drink, but also that it's sort of made for export without the export bit done to it, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe that's where the IPA came in. Maybe they call it IPA because it's more like that.
I think it's just a mispronunciation in
I'm sure, I'm sure it is.
that's
Yeah.
that's a better story. Yeah.
The IPA's done very well. This is a batch 2. We produce 6,000 at a time in each batch, and we make reference to the batch on the bottle because we want to ensure. The thing is, we're a small distillery. You know, we're filling 14 casks a week. We're doing about 80,000 liters of pure alcohol a year, so we're absolutely micro compared to the big boys. Still large compared to the smaller boys in England, but Mike, I mean, what I heard the other week that what Glenfiddich use in a day, we use in a year barley wise, to put it in scale. But the reason we make reference to the batch number is that this batch and the last batch have never met one another, they've never touched, and therefore there isn't necessarily going to be a consistency there. There's going to be some variances between each batch of finish that we produce. And we like to celebrate that and let people realize that if they had a batch 1 and a batch 2 of the IPA finished side by side, they're drinking 2 different whiskies. They're following a similar maturation process, but they are still 2 different whiskies, you know. So the batch 1 of this got, at the spirits business, it got a master's medal. This year it got a gold, I think, but the last year it got a master's medal. Yeah, it's interesting, the awards category with the IPA, but it's yeah, for me, a very interesting whiskey. In that process, you're absolutely right. The fact that we can empty the casks of beer and then refill them on the same day, that means that you get that freshness and you get that hoppy influence. Somebody said hoppy is a tasting note. I think it's great. You might have seen I've just had a tot of water to it as well, a little bit of water, and it will really open up, and you'll get a lot more of those pear drop, fruity, sweet shop notes coming back to the fore.
It's definitely, I mean, for me, it's definitely got pear drop, those kind of boiled travel sweets, definitely coming through. We've got Chris Walker has said pear and satsuma notes. Ian says I get more orange sherbet on the nose for this one. As you said, Paul said hoppy. Chris says definitely getting that apple strudel that someone mentioned. IPA cast definitely adds something. Toffee apples on the palate, says Frank D. So it's quite interesting that it seems to have brought out that orangey kind of flavor as well, that kind of kind of citrus, again similar to the first one, but just on a different spectrum, I suppose.
Yeah. I think for me as well, it's got a drying. It's drier. I think if for those, I mean, I've stupidly not brought 6 glasses. I've only got a small barrel to pour from. But for those who've got the whiskey side by side, if anyone's got that facility, if you taste them comparably, for me the IPA dries it out a little more. It makes me salivate. It's higher acidity and it's drier. People forget that hops in the first place with beer were added as a way to dry out the sweet notes you're getting with a malt. So actually, when you apply it to a whiskey, you get a slightly longer finish for me and a little bit more drying, like almost shortbready, biscuity notes coming out toward the end.
Yeah, definitely, especially after you add water. I think it gets even drier again.
Yeah, that's where I'm at now. Yeah, I think that might be. I was worried that I was on one there, but I think adding a little bit of water, it just dry it out a little bit.
I think you're right. I'll see if anyone else agrees. Ian says I get fresh orchard fruits on the nose, which is bang on, but it's very similar to the first one as well. They definitely are. That you can definitely see the. I know it's an obvious thing to say, but it's not always the case with these type of finishes. You can definitely really get the fingerprints and the kind of DNA of the first whiskey on there.
Yeah, I mean, that is where commercially it's really viable and useful for me to have a range of finishes alongside the flagship. You know, the idea of it, and hopefully throughout the evening you'll see variables. We're creating a distillate style and we're creating a house style, which is reflected in the flagship. The thing with whiskey is not just about oak, obviously. There's lots of different points at which you affect the flavour of the outcome, but our new make spirit sings for me in the flagship. And then when you come on to finishing, you're getting that same style. When I'm training hotels or bars or restaurants who often think they know a lot about whiskey, I know this because I used to be one, they think they know a lot about whiskey and they actually don't know much about whiskey, is an easy way to describe the maturation between the flagship to the finishes is with the flagship, you've got a canvas and you've painted it blue. And with the finishes, you've got a canvas and you've painted it blue. But once that paint is dried, you've put some yellow dots on top. You've got the same kind of style underneath, but just a little bit of something different on top. So it puts you in an almost safe space. Like, you know, if you like Filey Bay Flagship, then you'll generally be all right with the rest of the finishes. But they've just got subtle variances amongst them, you know?
Yeah, no, totally. So you've heard it here, folks. If you didn't like the flagship, just leave the call until the Peated.
Yeah, that's the other side of that coin, Luke. Yeah, correct. If you don't like it, leave now.
Paul had said, yep, water adds a little something. Didn't get it at first, but now have orange slash clementine, big peel, big time. A dash of water really brings out the sweetness on the IPA, says Nick. A bit of ginger biscuit in the development. That's a great taste note, Frank.
It's a great tasting note, yeah.
Brilliant. So will
Lovely.
we come on to the Moscatel? Was there
Yeah.
something there you wanted to show us as well?
Well, what I thought I'll do is I'll pour everybody a Moscatel. For everybody get themselves a glass of Moscatel, finish. I'll tell you a brief amount about the whiskey and the casks are used in that, and then I'll take you on a brief, steady tour around our still house, which probably detracts from the appreciation of the free distillery tour that you're getting it live now, but you get a tasting of some distillery exclusives while you're here normally. So Moscatel finish. Moscatel's the grape. And these are sherry casks. Now, Joe will talk about this later in a little bit of footage that I'll show you from our whiskey director up at the warehouse. But we use Martin Miguel for all of our European oak. And I don't know all of the names of all of the distilleries that they sell casks to, but I know Glentourret's one of them, because when we last got a delivery of their oak, they accidentally tried to deliver us the PX casks that were meant for Glentourret. We really wanted to get a Sharpian right, you know. Filey Bay was here on the side of one of the casks, so we decided against it. Anyway, this is a Moscatel finish. This is a hogshead cask that had held Moscatel sherry in. Now, Moscatel is not as commonly used as Pedro Jimenez or Oloroso, but it is a sherry, nevertheless, certified sherry cask. Hogshead casks are 250 litre, and we're finishing our whiskey in these casks for anywhere from 6 months up to 2 years, depending on how active the casks are. Now, they are all first fill from Moscatel. They've all had the Moscatel in for 10 years, but you just get one or two where they're lively and one or two that are, you know, slightly less lively. So when we talk about age of finishing, the majority of what's in this is about 6 to 7 month finished, but then some of it is up to 2 year finished as well, which is bringing on a little bit of that dried fruit, I believe, and other flavors that you might tell me yourselves, hopefully.
You said it is a sherry, the Moscatel.
Yeah, it's a Moscatel sherry. Yeah. Moscatel is generally used for fortified wines or sweet wines or wines, and it's related to the Muscat, Moscatel, great. But yeah, Muscadet. But the Moscatel has been grown in Spain, made and fortified in cask in the sherry triangle. Yeah, so it is a sherry, certified sherry cask. Yeah.
Marvelous.
So I'll have a quick sip and a spit, and then I'll walk you guys around.
And in terms of what we sip on this, the length of finish in this compared to versus the IPA cask as well.
Sorry, the IPA finish was 5 months. And in the Moscatel example, this is a finish for 6 months up to 2 years. The bourbon maturation in both examples is a minimum of 4 years, but it varies. Again, it's a combination of about 30 casks, ranging from 3.5 up to 6 years old. So we generally say initial maturation in bourbon is about 4.5, and then finish is minimum 6, but it varies depending on how lively those specific casks are, how active they are.
Brilliant.
Right. I'd love to tell you the next bit's rehearsed, but it isn't. So you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to talk solidly for about 2-3 minutes as I walk you around the stills as steadily as I possibly can. Can I unplug this? No. Right. So we have got 2 stills. We have got 5,000 litre wash still. All of our stills were produced by Forsyth of Scotland, first thing to tell you. So this is where our 5,000 litres of wash are going in. Inside there, you've got your copper coils. Hot steam through these levers is pushed through those coils, and then we're starting to heat our wash up. Now that distillation's coming, the vapor's coming up all the way along. I'm hoping you can see this through along our line arm, through the condenser, and then back out through our spirit safe. Sorry. Now at the end of that process, we've got about 1,700 litres of low wines, 20% alcohol, absolutely teeming with flavour, lots of pineapple, tropical fruits, banana bread, those kind of funky flavours that you're getting from a longer fermentation. But obviously it's not a spirit. So tomorrow, in this example, trying to spin around now and not trip over my own feet. Hope the video's okay. Is the video okay, Luke?
Yeah, no, it's visible. Everyone else can see. A few thumbs up.
It's visible. Visible is not a good. Yeah, I can see. Nice. So this is a 3,500 litre pot still, which is where we're distilling our spirit. So the 20% lower wines go into here, and then of course rises up through the copper along the line arm. You're just seeing a little glimpse of a rectifying column, which I'll talk you more about in a minute there. And then that gets recondensed and comes out here as a new make spirit. Now this is a 73% new make spirit at the end of this day. Very light, very fruity, very floral. You're getting all of those banana bread flavors, but you've got quite a nice, thick, oily texture as well. And that's all relevant to the copper contact. That's all relevant to viscosity, which we're producing by not stripping everything out of the spirit. We're leaving quite a lot of body and flavor in the spirit there. Now, you probably saw me just quickly breeze past this then. This is our rectifying column. Now, everything, it's important to clarify, because this isn't what happens in Scotland. Everything we distill goes through this. Everything we've distilled is pot distilled first and foremost. But if you look along the top of the line arm there, just here, you can see there's a lever where we can move that across, and then the vapor will go through this aluminium tube along into the bottom of the rectifying column. And you've got four windows in there, 4 plates. So the vapor, effectively, this is an extension of the pot still. The vapor is going to go through here. It's going to do a lot more legwork. It's going to work hard to get to the top of that rectifying column. It's going to pass through 4 copper plates in the process. All that copper's doing is acting like wire wool. It's pulling out all of the darkness. It's pulling out some of that thicker body, and it's making a lighter, sweeter spirit. You're getting quite a lot of reflux in here as well, which is where at the top it's recondensing, and then it's coming back down. It's hitting one of the hot copper plates, and it's returning to a vapor and then rising back up again. So a lot of reflux there, giving you extra copper contact to create an even lighter, fruitier style. And at the end of this process, once it's recondensed, we're going back out. And in this example, you've got an 86% new make spirit, if that makes sense, Luke.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So 86% off the rectifying still. And did you say, so no, does everything go through the rectifying still in the end, or is that a
no?
Runs?
So 6 months on, 6 months off.
Right.
So all spirit, yesterday's feints, yesterday's foreshots, and yesterday's low wines are put into our spirit still. That's 2,700-ish, thereabouts, going in there, litres. And then that distillation happens, as I say, we distill on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So everything is distilled via pot, but we can switch that lever. So currently we're on pot solely. So the spirit, the vapor that's rising has been distilled solely through a pot. If we were to move that lever across 90 degrees, then we'd be pushing the vapor through the column as well, after being distilled by a pot. So we switch on and switch off 6 months of each year. So 6 months on, 6 months off. And those new make spirits are stored separately, one being 73%, which is solely pot distilled, one being 86%, which has been pushed through that rectifying column after being pot distilled. Both of those spirits are cut to 63.5%, and then both of them are separately matured in their own individual casks, if that makes sense, which gets shipped up to the warehouse where we store it.
Perfect. Excellent. No, that's fascinating. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. And there's a few taste notes coming in there for the Moscatel, but be great to get your questions in there as well. In regards to that, in terms of the I know you've probably said this already, but there's a lot of information to take in from the.
No, it's good. Yeah, I realize it.
Yeah. On to now, everything you distill though is 100% single malt, is it? You're not using any other grains or anything.
No, it's entirely our own single malt. Yeah, it's entirely our own malted barley. Yeah.
Perfect. And
from a definitional perspective, if we were in Scotland, which I'm not sure if what you were getting at there, if we were in Scotland, would the SWA allow us to call this a single malt? Probably not. We'd probably have to call it a single grain for anything that's been pushed through that rectifying column, because obviously in Scottish rules, everything must be solely distilled via a pot still, which this isn't. It's all distilled via pot still, but some of it is pushed through the rectifying column as well. Yeah. So that part of it would be probably a challenge.
But even if you, I mean, I mean, I appreciate why they have them, the definition so strict up here, because it's protecting an important thing that we all on this call love. But it can veer into the absurd in the sense that as you say, you can only have single malts, and even if you distill other barley on a pot still, it's also single grain is everything basically. It's not a single malt or a blend. Like, you know, there's we had a tasting with Inchderny, as I'm sure people on here know, a while back, and they've been making rye whiskey, but they have to bottle it as single grain, even though it's made exactly as an American rye would be made or whatever. But yeah, you're probably right in terms of the definitions. But no, I was just curious as to whether or not you threw, and not from whether or not you're making single grain there, but rather had you experimented with other barleys.
Yeah, well, yes, but we're a long way off with it. We've grown rye, we've grown fermented and distilled rye, and we've got casks with rye spirit in. But it was a nightmare. It was about 3 months into me starting with the company, and the fermentation with rye was a nightmare. The distillation was a nightmare. Dom, my head distiller, hated it. Tasty spirit at the end of the day, real spicy as you'd expect, lots of black pepper. But and in all transparency, the how, when, why of it that being released, I couldn't tell you. It's not my choice, and I'm not aware of it. But I know that we've experimented with that. But everything that we're tasting today, everything we've ever released into any market so far, has been single malt whiskey with malted barley that we grow. Yeah.
And in terms of the 6 months on, 6 months off for the rectifying column,
Yeah.
with that spirit, when you're bottling for any of like the releases today, are they delineated? Do you marry them? What happens in that regard?
Yeah, really valid question again. Yeah, it's a combination. So up at the warehouse, we've got bourbon casks that have got a P written on them, and we've got bourbon casks that have got a C written on them. And I guess if you ask Joe, our whiskey director, who you'll hear a bit from in a while, he likes to talk about options. Options are good in whiskey. You hear him say it all the time. Options are good. Options are good. I guess in this example, using that analogy of the artist with the canvas, you've got a light blue and a dark blue in a sense of the two distillates. So later on down the line, when it comes to marrying casks to make one batch, it will be a part of Joe's thought process as to some of this might be rectified and some of it might not be. He knows that when it comes to a marriage of 20, 30 casks, and therefore we know that there's generally a ratio. Generally, it's pot heavy. It's, kind of 60-40, 70-30 in favor of pot distillate because you get a lot more body that way, but it just gives us options. So in answer to your question, the spirits are matured separately, but then they're brought back together later on down the line to produce one batch of single malt whiskey, if that makes sense, Luke.
No, it does. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, there's some great tasting notes coming in there, and I'm not ignoring you folks, but I'm just going to come to a question that Ian has. I was going to ask, as a member of he says EWG, which I'm presuming is the English Whiskey Guild. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, if that's some sort of cult I'm not aware of. What do you do different, if anything, for your liquid?
Say that. What do we do different for?
I presume, Ian, if you allow me to translate your question for you, that you mean in terms of difference to, let's say, Scotland, in terms of what you're allowed to do. Is that what you mean, Ian? In terms of the technical file definition. We'll let Ian come on and maybe clarify that question. And
well, no, I can talk into that a little bit. I think I generally understand the question. What are you doing? Yeah, I think I get that. Well, first of all, we're a proud member of the guild. Tom is second, whatever the term is, second to director of the guild. So there's Tom and Dave, who are the founders. Tom and Jenny, who you've seen a video of, they're heavily involved with it. Currently, with legalities and definitions, there's a GI coming through, which is geographical indication, which is a definition of English whiskey, which has got all sorts of definition about it, from how it's distilled. I think the UK grain sourced is key. I think all grain used in English whiskey, according to this GI, will be sourced in the United Kingdom. It has to be distilled through copper pots, I think, at least at some point. Obviously, we'll be okay because we're using the copper pots and then we're rectifying some of it. But as for the rest of it, I don't know anything more about that. And I know it's something that's happening currently, but I think the catch-22 is realizing that there's 50 different whiskey distilleries minimum now in England. All of those are passionate people who've put a lot of time, love and care into their whiskey. And so getting them all to agree on what definition English whiskey will be is quite a challenge. I guess for us, we try to, I think the marketing copy we use as a business is respecting tradition whilst doing things our own way. And, as I've mentioned, we had Jim Swan in from the early stages. He opened Cavalan, he opened Milk and Honey, he opened Cotswolds, Kilhoman, Lindores Abbey, McNean, and others and more. And so, using copper pot stills was the way to go because Jim was involved. Maturing in full-size oak casks was the way to go. So there's a lot of experimentational opportunities in the English whiskey scene currently, and we do that a little bit, as I've just expressed, with the rectifying column and with some of the beer casks, and the fact that the wash is produced at our brewery by us, but up the road these things wouldn't be allowed in Scotland. That being said, there's certain things that are ruled and managed in Scotch whisky, which are quite correct to be managed to ensure that its caliber and its quality, and that's one thing that the Scots should be proud of, that the SWA have ensured that Scotch whisky is still this good this many years later. I don't know if that answers the question, and that's just me waffling, but
No,
I think it's a bit of
think it does. It definitely is a challenge for the way English whiskey has emerged. I think in the sense, as you say, 50 distilleries in the guild. Although didn't Toad moved to Scotland, did they? Have I read that recently?
well, I shouldn't be here just letting them out. Toad moved to Yorkshire.
They
Toad
moved to Yorkshire. That was it. Sorry, I knew they moved further north than where they were. So they're still in the English Whiskey Guild. So they're now your neighbours. But obviously the volume wise, even compared to a country like Ireland, which is about 42 distilleries, but the volume produced from them is just outstrips English whiskey by huge amounts. So you have a lot of small players, which is going to make it a challenge because they're all trying to do their own thing. But you do need to guarantee some sort of kind of quality, because it is you do get a lot of cowboys out there, unfortunately.
That's the thing. I think you took the words right out of my mouth, Luke. You've got to try and protect the quality of what English whiskey, and that's what the guild's there for. That's what this geographical indication is going to be for. But equally, and on the other side of that coin, you've got to not limit creative ability. But on the other side of that coin, you've not got to stop cowboys putting neutral grain spirit in a balsa wood cask for a week and calling it English whiskey. Not that anyone's doing that; it's extreme. But there's two sides to this coin. It's ensuring the quality of what we produce as a nation going forward is quality, and we're all a part of that in collaboration. But at the same time, you need to ensure that there's some limitation to what is going to be able to be called English whiskey to protect that, and that will cut a few people off, unfortunately. I think in the long process,
We'll definitely have to protect the longevity. I mean, we see this with gins as well. Like when during the gin boom, the amount of muck that ended up floating around on the market, being marketed as artisanal local gin, it does have to be protected, and that's not. I'm sure the people who get into it, I'm not saying it means that everyone's a cowboy in the sense that they want to rip people off, but it's a very difficult industry to produce consistent quality in. The drinks industry, full stop, let alone whiskey. So, you can get in with all the right intentions, but when there's lots of overheads and you're under pressure and you're maybe not as knowledgeable as you thought you were, it can be incredibly challenging. Ian says they announced there were 55 distilleries on St. George's Day, which is a good
nice. Didn't know that.
I mean, for context, I think Yorkshire has a bigger population than Scotland. So I mean, this is the kind of the difference between the two. It's like, you've got Toad have moved to York a year in Yorkshire, but it's obviously not geographically as large, but in terms of populace, you've got a huge amount of people there, which maybe actually has given me another question. But I might read out some of these great tasting notes because I'm just conscious of the time, and maybe we should be coming on to the STR finish. We've got some. Ian says I get fresh. Oh no, sorry, that's from the old one. So we've got. Excuse me, get my thing. David says getting blackberries in the nose and darker berries carry through the palate. This is a winner for me. Getting lots of plum on the nose, says Nick. And as Jeff said, much drier finish. Nose pear drops strong again, but tastes totally different from first two. Creamy almond, ripe bananas. Totally agree. Frank says great tour. Don't need to pay for one now. It says I was going to ask. Oh, sorry, that was a question we already addressed. Paul says more creamy, like fruit cake mixture. Richer than the first two, like a lowland Scotch, hints of bladnoch.
Yeah, all of that stuff I agree with. Yeah, viscosity, it's got a thickness to it. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And Graham says lovely, creamy, fruity, very enjoyable, very refreshing on the nose. Most New English distilleries are producing integrity malts. So there you go.
I agree. No, I agree. I drink a lot of it. I think another thing I'll say regards that is us as a business and me as a whiskey geek is that we don't, I did a tasting in Glasgow not 6 weeks ago. I'm in Edinburgh regularly. I'm in Inverness at some point in the next 2 months. I've got a tasting with Inverness. We don't say English whiskey or Yorkshire whiskey is better than anyone else's whiskey. Where we want to be is a world-class world whiskey. We're very proud of where we're from, and as you can get, we're very Yorkshire. I mean, the glass is from Leeds, the box that the whiskey comes in, the bottle is coming from Halifax. We call it Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery, but we also want to rub shoulders with the Scots, want to rub shoulders with the Taiwanese, Japanese, Australian. We're a proud world whiskey as a distillery, but we are English and we know that, and we're proud to be championing that too.
So you're English. You're not pro Yorkshire separatism, no?
Are you asking me on a
You're not
personal
Northern
level, or?
nationalist.
Well, on a personal, yeah. I mean, the one thing I'd say about the Yorkshire thing, we like to shout about how many medals have been won, for England in Yorkshire. But as you rightly point out, there's a lot of us. It's a massive part of the country. If we could pull the border, I say it often, and I did say this in the tasting in Glasgow, and I did say it in the tasting in Edinburgh. If we could pull the border down, would we? I'm not sure. I think it'd make my life a little bit easier to be talking about Scotch. But no, we're proud of where we're from. We stand strongly where we are, and yeah, it's not really about where we're from. It's about what you do to make the whiskey taste good, I think, at the end of the day.
Okay, so you've not come out against the tyranny of London just yet.
Not quite. Give me a week in London, and ask me again.
Fair enough. Brilliant. So we come on to this STR.
Yes, yeah. So this is a real nice nod to Dr. Jim Swan. So STR, shaved, toasted, and recharred Rioja, or red wine. So these casks have been sourced from Rioja in Spain. They've had red wine in them any period of time, really. Now, red wine flavors are great in our whiskey. We want berries, we want chocolate, we want that vanilla. But what we don't want is tannin. We don't want a bitter finish on the whiskey, and we don't want pink whiskey either. It's darker, which I'll explain how and why in a minute. But they're the things we want to avoid: tannin primarily in purple whiskey. So what we're doing, if this is an ex-bourbon cask, but if it were an ex-red wine barrique, is we're taking the top and the bottom off the cask. The interior is shaved back to pull away some of the really heavily red wine soaked oak. And then the cask is put on top of a fire in which it's heated, and then it's toasted, recharred, reburnt on the interior to a char 2 for those who are interested. So it's a medium char level. A little bit of sherry is sprayed on the inside, not to soak it, but literally just to stop it cracking on transport up to North Yorkshire. The top and the bottom put back on, and then that's shipped up to us, where we can get our bourbon matured whiskey and re-rack into these lovely STR Rioja casks, which again, that finishing time is 6 to 9 months. And this is the 4th batch of that whiskey. And it's actually just got an IWSC gold. It just got 95 out of 100 at the IWSC, which we're really, really proud of. It's the first gold medal we've got as a distillery at the IWSC. We've got near there. We've got 94s and 93s before, but this is the first time it got a 95. So we're really happy with that.
No, yeah, brilliant. That's really interesting. It's definitely, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's much kind of darker notes in there. Like it's like dark berry, kind of veering on like sort of leathery. It's or licorice maybe is the right one. Steph and Sarah, that's a great tasting note. Yeah. Yeah. So it's Ian says the Filey Bay STR casks, there's so much more going on for me. It definitely, I totally agree. It's a lot more complex. The ABV is the same, is it? Where's it? I put down the wee little bottle. Yeah, it was 46% as well. Because it tastes like a castrant, but not in the sense that it's strong, it's punchy, but I mean in the sense that the castrants are able to contain multitudes and layers that 40 or 46 doesn't provide. It definitely has that more complexity to it.
Yeah, I think by shaving the oak back slightly, toasting and recharring, you're letting more oak influence in, but that oak's obviously had some time with red wine mingling with it as well. So you do get a little bit of summer berries toward the end, but actually up front it's got that big rich, almost like new oak style to it. It's got that big rich caramel hit up front, which is lovely. It's lovely. This takes water really well as well. So whiskey that it's got more complexity. The joke I always make in tasting is if I want to drink too much whiskey, if my kids are a nightmare and they've taken 4 hours to go to bed and I'm feeling a little bit depressed, it's Moscatel finish I'm going to drink because it's just sugary and sweet and yummy. It just gives you a little cuddle. Whereas if the kids are good as gold and perhaps my partner's gone out for dinner and I'm on my own reading a book, then I'll drink STR because STR's got just a little bit more to find. The more you look, the more you find with STR. Moscatel's great, but it's quite singularly yummy, whereas STR's got a bit more complexity to it for me. It's got even a little bit of black pepper there as well.
So with your wife away for the rest of the week, how many bottles do you think you're going to get through?
Oh, I'm a little bit nervous, to be honest with you, Luke. Yeah. Well, actually, I've told myself I'm going to try and avoid drinking this week with my partner being away for the whole for the whole week, because when you're woken up at 5:30 in the morning by a four-year-old and a 5-year-old, you quickly regret it, and you've got nowhere to turn. You've got nowhere to run and hide, or no support. So
I was,
yeah, a one night. If it was one night, then yeah, I'd drink quite a bit. But 4-5 nights, no, I think I'm just going to play it safe and stay sober, to be honest.
that's fair. I don't have kids, but I was at a stag party last weekend, and on the Sunday, we ended up at a 4-year-old's birthday party. One of my godchildren, and yeah, I mean, after 3 days on the stag and then going to 4-year-old's birthday party, it was an experience. I'll tell
You're
you that.
better off having a few drinks before you go to the party. That's the trick there. Yeah, you're
Probably,
better off.
I don't think I had sobered up actually. It wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. When I tell people, they're like, "Oh, how did you manage?" But it was, I mean, it was rough, more because I was tired rather than like sort of
Yeah,
cliched, my head hurts. But it was a funny
definitely.
one because with the thing, it's the thing with 4-year-olds parties is that when I walked into the party, I didn't recognize the child. I'd never seen him before.
You're at the wrong party.
No, B 4 years old. Sorry, it's a bad pun. But the rest of the story is actually true. I did from a stag party to a 4-year-old's birthday party. But
Yeah, I think I'm oversharing on a public forum here, but I think if I were in your position there, I'd gone for a beer before the party. It's much better to be drunk at a 4-year-old's party than it is to be hungover at a 4-year-old's party. That's my advice on that one,
good shout.
professionally or
I'll
not.
remember that for next time.
How's the STR going for everybody? Is there any tasting notes or anything?
Yeah,
Anything
I
good?
said so. Ian says, or sorry, Jeff has said liquid is thicker, getting an old getting an old dusty church floor. Interesting. Lewis says definitely like to know how you know what a dusty church tastes like. Ian says I like the STR finish with the red wine. Sometimes I find red wine can be overpower a whiskey, but this is much smoother. Frank D says STR has a chocolate note to it with fruitcake. One to give some time in the glass to. Speaking of time in the glass to, maybe now is the best time while people sit with this for a bit longer to play the next video.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, should we go ahead and we'll put the video? Yeah, Steve, my very glamorous assistant and absolute technical legend, is currently just setting that up for you all. So I think it'll come on in the next couple of minutes. He'll give me a nod. Yeah, it's quite a good time, particularly talking about STR casks. Yeah, nice time to hear our Joe talk about whiskey. I'll warn you all at the start, we've already trimmed this video down. We've trimmed it a good amount.
Marvelous. Dave says excellent subtle use of finishing casks. Melts as tropical fruit, melon, chocolate, weak coffee.
Nice. Yeah.
Excellent. And now I can see this is like the movie starting. This is the bit where the lights dim, folks, and the
lights are dimming, guys. Right, curtains are drawing.
Relax.
Are we aware, Steve? No, he's not. He's shaking his head worryingly.
So I'd say if Steve moves the mouse away after he
Hi
hits
everybody, my name is Joe Clark, Whiskey Director at Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery, and we're having a quick look around our warehouse. Going to show you guys some of the different types of casks that we've been filling over the last 8 years that we've been in production here. So if you come with me, we'll have a quick look around. The main cask that we fill is the first fill bourbon barrel, and these are absolutely crucial to our house style and distillery character. So most of our range is built around whiskey matured in first fill bourbon, of course Flagship, entirely matured in first fill bourbon casks, and then our finishes are all matured in first fill bourbon to some degree. So really, really important cask for us, and it's identifiable by its size. And we've got an example here just on the floor where I've put one next to another type of cask, so you can see the size difference here. So first fill bourbon barrel holds 200 litres. These held bourbon, in this case in Kentucky, for 5 years before the bourbon was emptied out, and then the casks were shipped to us whole. We've then filled them with spirit. So after first fill bourbon, kind of moving up in terms of size, we have what we call barriques. So we've got some here. So you can see again the difference in size on the head of the cask. And again on the floor compared to the bourbon cask here, again you can see it's slightly wider. It's just a slightly bigger cask. Not by much, believe it or not. That is a capacity of 220 litres versus the bourbon cask at 200. Bearing in mind these are approximates, you might get 190 litres, 195 in some bourbon, might get 225 in the barrique. So 200 for the bourbon, 220 for the barriques. And the next size after that we fill is hogsheads, and these are normally sherry hogsheads. So got an example of those here. You can see we're getting quite a bit bigger now. So the sherry hogshead, really, really beautiful, beautiful casks from Spain. Now, the supplier of these casks that we work with is one of the very, very best in the industry. We've been working with this supplier, which is Miguel Martin, since we started. So the very first sherry casks we filled were from Miguel, and going forward, we're getting plenty more of these really fantastic casks from him. So if you look at the end of the cask compared to the bourbon, quite a bit of difference in size and a big difference in volume. We're talking 250 litre capacity, but it's not unusual for us to sometimes reach into 260 litres in these hogsheads. So it is a really, really kind of beautiful sherry cask and an example of a very traditional type of cask. The hogshead cask, been in the industry for a very, very long time. We've got Oloroso hogsheads, Pedro Jimenez sherry hogsheads, we've got Fino sherry hogsheads, we've also got Madeira as well, amongst a few other interesting types of sherry that are in this warehouse. And behind me there's a lot of casks here. We're talking 4,500 casks in this warehouse, so yeah, nice variety of flavour in there. So we've done bourbon barrels, we've done barriques, and we've done sherry hogsheads. That leaves one size of cask left that we fill, which is the sherry butts. And we don't fill a lot of these, and we never have. They are big, big casks. We're talking 500 litre capacity in these, and they're not easy to move around, and wow, are they expensive. And you know, we've got a very small number of sherry butts, and they really are some of our most precious casks. Some of our very rarest whiskey is from these casks. So, you know, we are very, 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 very fond of them when it comes to the whiskey that we get out of these casks, but we are not fond on moving them. Really quite heavy and massive. So to quickly recap again, we've got bourbon barrels, barriques, sherry hogsheads, and sherry butts. And yeah, these are the main casks that we're filling.
Yeah, it just cuts off. There you go, back in the room.
Marvelous.
Is that of interest to people? What is that?
No,
A little bit of a...
Definitely think I was interesting. I'd love to know if people found that interesting on the call. I had a friend of mine who worked for Middleton. This is a true story. When he was when people would ask him what he did, he would say, I sniff butts for a living. One of his jobs was to open up the sherry butts when they came into the warehouse and smell them to see if you got any kind of the kind of, I can't remember, like
off smells.
The off smells that would mean that they would have to discount the cask. But we got some really good taste feedback on the STR.
Nice.
There was, I've gone. Someone described it there as naughty somewhere. Nick says, really enjoying this. I can describe it as naughty. Bit of water definitely brings out the red wine notes, tropical fruit. Excellent use of, we've already said that one. Enjoying the complexity of the STR, cherry and vanilla notes with a hint of tobacco. Tobacco definitely get. I know I said leather earlier on. I was struggling actually trying to put my finger on it, and licorice was a better thing, but tobacco as well is definitely more what I get than leather. Graham says, got to agree with Nick. Naughty we drop, red wine subtle, but all the better for it. Love to see the warehouses, says Stefan Sir. Paul says, absolutely love the tour, both videos. Thanks for taking the time to provide some behind the scenes info. Frank says, finish gets longer with time in the glass. Totally agree with that. We also, just on that, before we move on from this one, I'm not saying we have to jump forward straight away, but I have been neglecting price points. So since the first one, all the last three we've tried have been £68. And then with the discount, that gives you 57.8. So the last two are a change in price point, which we'll mention. So the special release porter cask is going to be £83 before the discount, and the peated finish is £68 as well. So that's cheaper one. So it's the next one is the outlier in terms of the price point. But just wanted to give everyone a quick overview of that in case you're thinking of picking up a few bottles yourselves. James says, I have a question that isn't directly about Filey Bay, but you might be able to answer. Is there any difference in maturation from storing casks upright compared to horizontal? I only thought because seeing the upright ones in the background of the video, but also having some laid down.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know the exact correct answer to that question, but I know that we store them vertically. I think it's to do with leaking, potential to leak by keeping them stood upright more than anything else. But yeah, that's as much as I can tell you on that front. I think there's also an efficiency aspect to storing them upright. You know, that what you saw there was probably 20, no, less than that even. Probably a 25th of the warehouse, and the stacks are what, four high. You might have missed just it's 4,500 casks up there, but the ones that we've got out on display on the side, they're the ones that we generally pop open. You know, part of the video that Joe goes on there is to actually draw some cask drawn samples out. And so when we have journalists, or occasionally if I've got trade customers who, you know, particularly like, you know, whiskey shops and specialists, maybe Luke would want to come one day, we'll bring them up to the warehouse from time to time and draw some cask drawn samples, and for that they need to be on the side, but aside from that they're entirely stored vertically. Yeah,
brilliant. I mean, yeah, I mean, I suppose it also, I don't think it makes a difference to maturation, just my own 2 cents, but I think it does, depending on their previous life, where the bung hole is on them can make a big difference as to how you need to store them, or whether or not you need to replace staves before storing them, because that can become over long periods of time the potential weak point in the cask. Chris said that was fascinating. Defo need to get a visit to the distillery. It looks like about 9 minutes from us. Will you be at the Great Yorkshire Show?
Yes, yeah. We've, funny enough, had a meeting this afternoon about the Great Yorkshire Show. Yeah, we will be. I'll be there on the Monday and Friday if you want to come and see me. They reel me in for the setup and breakdown days. I'm not sure why they bring me in for those days, but yeah, we will be. Yeah, it's fascinating. You're only 9 minutes away and you've not been here, to be honest. Yeah, it's probably the best breakfast
now since he's actually
in Yorkshire.
90 minutes away.
90. Well, that's more forgivable. That's more forgivable. Yeah, but still, it's definitely worth a trek. And you know, genuinely, I'm biased, and I'm clearly a salesperson, so do take me with a pinch of salt. But we've got a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old at home. We come to Filey a lot. There's beautiful rock pools. Filey's just a lovely little bit. Hummerby Gap is the best cobweb cleaning walk I've ever done. It's just good sea air, fresh walk. You've got the bottom of the bay, you've got Bempton Cliffs as well, which is why we've got a gannet on the front of the bottle, and we use a gannet throughout. It's the largest gannet sanctuary in the UK. They have puffins, they have seals. It's beautiful. It's a really lovely place to visit, just as a little, you know, day out kind of thing. If you're local, I'd highly recommend it. And you can visit a distillery while you're there and have a few whiskies. I mean, who's moaning about that?
Yeah. Top tip, folks, when you're going traveling is, I'm sure you all know this, but you know, say, look, I know you're tired. We're leaving early in the morning to get to X location. I'll drive there, you drive back.
Yes.
That's the way to do it.
One if you haven't learned that one, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
So we're happy to move on to the 5th whiskey.
Yes, I think we should come on to the porter cask.
The porter, yeah. So I wanted to clarify, apologies for the slight confusion with the pricing and the structure. Yeah, you would traditionally taste the last being the most expensive, and in many ways this is the more special whiskey. Well, it is the most special in a sense of rarity and uniqueness. But I want to do the peated at the end, because the peated, this is very lovely, floral, delicate special release, the porter cask, whereas the peated has obviously got phenols in it, and therefore I wouldn't want to overpower your palate. So we've just flipped it slightly here. Just so, if this was a big sherry bomb, which it has been in previous, then I would have done it at the end. But with it, the delicacy of porter casks, I didn't want to overpower them with peat. So porter casks. We have done a port finish as well, confusing matters, but that was long sold out, long time ago. So porter cask, we release a special release in the spring, and we release a special release in the winter. Now in the winter, typically it's more of a heavily sherried. It's always been a sherry cask reserve. So we've done Pedro Jimenez, we've done Oloroso, we've pulled some of those very lovely sherry butts out, and we've done sherry cask reserves in the winter. Whereas in the spring, we've done double oak, so that's using new oak as well as the bourbon maturation. And this spring, we released porter cask, which I should show you the label for. Now there's about 50 bottles left in our distillery shop. There's none available. The last 2 cases genuinely went to the whiskey shop because we only produced 2,000 bottles of it. And therefore, of those 2,000 bottles in all special releases, we keep 1,000 for us at the distillery, which a little bit goes onto our website, but the majority stays in the distillery for the people who've come to visit us. 500 bottles comes to me, and then 500 bottles, not for me personally, but for me to distribute across the UK trade. And then 500 bottles goes overseas. Now we're in China, America, most of Europe. We've just gone into Japan. So Dave's got quite a hard job distributing those 500 bottles across those marketplaces. And often he and I are fighting for those last few bottles. But point is, there's not a lot of this at all, hence it's got more money. So what we're doing in production here, similarly to the IPA finish, but we're getting ex-bourbon matured casks and ex-sherry mature casks, as in casks that had previously held our sherry cask reserve and our flagship whiskey. And we filled them with marmalade porter, which is a dark beer produced by the brewery. The beer sits in the casks for 15 months this time, and then is disgorged. And then again, on the same day, we can refill those now porter casks with our bourbon matured whiskey, where it stays for longer than it does in the IPA. We're literally talking about 5 or 6 casks that go into this, hence we've only produced 2,000 bottles. Hence it's a higher price point, and it tends to sell through quite quickly. A lot of this is the stuff that stores under people's beds and you end up seeing on secondary marketplace quite a lot. But we're in a nice position where we get to taste it this evening. So yeah, so it's a porter cask in a sense that it's bourbon matured and then it's re-racked into porter casks, but we've produced the porter casks. That's the point of difference with us as a distillery. We've got that facility. We're in a privileged position there.
Marvelous.
If that makes sense.
It definitely does make sense. I can't quite put my finger on some of these. There's definitely like sort of that dark maybe dark chocolate or not even dark chocolate, like cocoa powder before you know
Yeah,
like you make the hot chocolate flavor.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's like for me, what you tasted straight away was like a Nesquik milkshake kind of thing, chocolate milkshake. I think one automatically hears porter just as they would stout and think coffee, dark, rich, dark, almost bitter flavor, which, you know, in a beer sense it generally is. But actually, in this example, for me, I get on the nose. There's a milk chocolate there, which I really smell because I poured myself some of that when Joe was talking there, and I was nosing it, and there's a real rich chocolate, like a milk chocolate, and there's also just a little bit of burnt, like a burnt orange, at the back of the note as well, which is again we were really happy with. Like we almost, to speak transparently, we almost discussed the idea of dressing this in a vatting sense. So what I mean by dressing it is you're using another cask in it to affect the flavor. So if we added some Pedro Jimenez matured whiskey or some Oloroso matured whiskey, then that would bring the color darker and maybe bring some more of the almost expected flavors from what a porter cask would offer. But Joe and I, Dom and David, our managing director and founder, were talking about this, and we quite like the fact that there's an authenticity to this. This is what a whiskey tastes like when it's been spent some time in beer casks that had held porter for 15 months. And we've always kind of stuck to that culture, like don't hide anything, you know, almost just this is what it tastes like, and we're quite happy with that. Yeah,
no, it definitely works. Mela says chocolate orange marmalade. I think marmalade's a phenomenal tasting note for this whiskey. That is on the ball. Cooked apples. Paul says yes, chocolate orange, very Christmas. Frank D says beer notes certainly on the nose. Beer that has been standing in the glass. And Stefan Sir said Jaffa cake. Jaffa cake is a great tasting note as well.
Jaffa cake
really enjoy it because Jaffa cake is a great tasting note for me personally anyway, because it evokes two things. It's the flavor, but also the tasting note Jaffa cake evokes texture as well. And I think you definitely get that here as well. So that is spot on. No, I totally get what you mean in terms of both the fact that the flavors that we might think of as coming from a stout and porter might not necessarily be the ones that the cask imparts, but also in the sense that whiskey tasting is so suggestive as well. You know, you throw something out there, people go, "Oh yeah, I get that." You know, so just saying it's a porter cask or it's a stout cask, you're automatically going to be looking for those flavors. But I think what does come through is really interesting.
I wanted to just one thing I've forgotten to reference here is that we bottled this at 50% ABV as well. It's the only whiskey we're tasting this evening that's above 46. We bottle at 46 as a whole across the whole range minimum. Minimum, because for a number of reasons, we find it a sweet spot where you get the best flavor. You know, you get that alcohol versus flavor ratio smack on. We don't chill filter, so we don't want to take it below 46 for the sake of it never getting a haze. But yeah, with the porter, we bottled at 50% just because I think Joe felt that to let that chocolate and that orange and that rich beer notes, I think Jaffa cake's really great tasting note. But those flavors kind of come through with a bit more oomph at a 50% ABV. So we just didn't quite dilute it to the same as we have some of the other whiskies all of the other whiskies we've produced.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Paul has asked what the price for this is, so it's £83, but it's £70 with the discount. And Frank D said extra 4% from the 46% really gives it depth. I think it definitely does. Well, see, it's difficult because I would have said I totally agreed with Frank D, but then I thought the STR had depth that belied its ABV. So maybe this would have had depth even at 46%, but they're both the last two have been my favorites anyway so far. Not that the earlier ones weren't good, but no, this is just maybe my personal cup of tea. It's really good. So yeah, if there's any more tasting notes, folks, do get them in there. Before we come on to, I'm just conscious, a small wee bit is conscious of time. Morgan, I'm in no rush, but I'm aware that you have a bit of a drive home, and some people maybe want to on here might not want to be on the call all night. So before we come on to the last whiskey, is there anything you wanted to add about the distillery story in general? Anything else you wanted to share? Any tidbits in the distillery you wanted to show us?
I'm trying to think of everything I've waffled on about so far, to be honest with you, Luke. I think just important to say that aside from the malting of the barley, which is in Bridlington, we do everything ourselves, fermenting, distilling, maturing at our farm, bringing it back down here, vatting, bottling. I mean, I'm not going to show you it because it's in darkness at the moment, but we bottle everything by hand there. We label it ourselves. We work with local people. Throughout the process, as I mentioned, the glass is from Leeds and the box is from Halifax. We're employing just over 25 people now as a distillery, and we're very proud of the fact that we control every stage. That's something that we keep. Call us control freaks if you want, but yeah, there's nothing outsourced really, aside from the malting. And in honesty, when I came in, I said, it'd be great if we malted the barley ourselves on site. But the fact is, a stone's throw from us as people who've been doing it for centuries, who are just far, far superior. So it's like, why try and do it yourself when somebody else can do it a lot better, particularly when they're on your doorstep,
Yeah, and I do think people really value that grain to glass. I know that there's a lot of people on here who are big fans of terroir. Do you find that plays into your whiskies, Morgan?
Terroir has an interesting conversation as a subject in whiskey. No, we don't use the word terroir as a distillery as a whole, and we grow the barley ourselves. We know where it's grown, and you heard with what Jenny was talking about, that we know about the soil and we know about how to look after the soil and maintain the soil. But the key words that we use to describe what field to bottle whiskey is consistency and sustainability. We don't suggest that if the barley had been grown in this corner of the field, it would make the whiskey taste different to if it had been grown in that corner of the field. What makes these whiskies taste the way they taste is decisions we make in process. So if the understanding of the word terroir is in reference to the provenance of where we're located, as in it's damp most of the time and it's cooler climate, and that affects maturation, then yes, I suppose it's viable there. But if we're talking about terroir in a sense of where the barley has been grown affecting the outcome of the whiskey, then no, that we don't make that stance. We talk about the barley being a consistent raw material because we farm it ourselves, and then by applying quality practices, we end up with a world-class single malt at the end of the process.
Yeah,
in a nutshell.
I totally get where you're coming from. I remember a friend of mine was opening a grain to glass distillery, and this is about 10 years ago, and it was, well, maybe 7 years ago, around the time that Waterford were first opening in Ireland, and terroir was being pushed as a concept by Mark Rainier. And I said to him, did you I've been reading about sort of nitrogen content in the soil and all these things that were supposed to impact flavor. And I said, did you test any of this? Did you, what do you think in terms of flavor impact? And he says, to be honest, this is the field we own. It's 5 miles from the distillery. This is where we're going to be growing our barley, regardless of what these results come back with. So what's the point? It's just going to be,
maybe it's not as if we're going to move a farm.
This is our field we have. We're just going to stick with it. There's no point in investing.
Yeah, it's a consistent malt. In honesty, yeah, we've never gone down that line. We've never been in a position, we've never needed to, we won't ever need to be in a position where we're getting barley from anywhere else. And so, yeah, and I mean, I'm not here to knock anybody else. And everybody has their own thing that they talk about as the attendees tonight's tasting will know. So I'm not here to say anybody's right or wrong. But for me, what I found the most fascinating about being involved in a whiskey distillery, for the first few months, I did production. I was in here distilling, and I was at the brewery making wash and the whole shebang. what I realized was the amount of points at which you affect what this is before it's even gone into a cask, you know, the amount of points at which you have influence over the outcome of what the whiskey is. So for you to then be able to draw it right back to the field and say, oh, well, it was grown there and that's why it tastes this way is just, yeah, it's absurd in truth. And I mean that in respect to whoever uses whatever terminology that they want to use, you know. If it had been, then, you know, what about the fermentation times, the distillation points, the cut points, how you distill, whether you use a rectifying column, the oak you're maturing it in, and indeed the vatting of those casks and the dilution points. All of these points are directly impacting what the flavor of the whiskey is going to be, way more than, if anything, a fractional amount of from where the barley was sourced. You know, as I say, to repeat, we talk about consistency and we talk about sustainability as a distillery, and that's our brand message, I suppose.
Yeah, no, marvelous. So speaking of brand message, will we come on to the final whiskey of the evening?
Yeah, if that's cool with everybody. Yeah, if everyone's, I can't see if everyone's giving me a thumbs up, but I'm gonna. Yeah, Steve's nodding.
Lots of thumbs up there. Yeah,
lots of thumbs ups. Cool. So this is our peated finish.
There is some questions. I just want to say there is some questions in there that we'll come to after we taste this whiskey. So I'm not ignoring anyone who's popped in a question there in the chat. So sorry.
Yeah, cool. No, it's good. It's good. Peated finish. So we don't peat our barley. The barley that we grow, we get malted in Bridlington at Muntons, and it comes back to us as one big batch. They could malt it if we wanted them to. They could peat it if we wanted them to, but they'd be shipping the peat from the north of Scotland, and they'd be bringing it down and peating our barley with, and it kind of doesn't really go with the brand story. There's all sorts of questions about peat in the world. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole here, but instead, what we thought we'd try and worked really well was we'd buy casks from, I mean, anybody who's been to tastings before will realise when I say an unnamed distillery from Islay who've been going for about 15 years, who are independent and talk about farming barley, they'll probably understand who I'm referencing there. But importantly, when they do, it's not a collaboration. It's not a shared thing. We just really like those people's casks and we really like what they're doing. So we buy casks that had held peated whiskey and we finish our bourbon matured whiskey in these casks. So it's a peated finish rather than a peated whiskey, or indeed a peated barley in the first place, if that makes sense to everybody. Bourbon matured and then finished in peated whiskey casks for about 6 months, just to add that little bit of ashy smoke toward the end of the spirit.
I thought the turf and the peat that went to malted barley had come from Finland, so it makes way more sense now. But so we got some great questions. What people knows on this. I can't believe that not even people didn't even shake their heads with how bad that joke was. There was zero reaction. Dave has got one reaction. There we go. Thank you, Dave, for your pity reaction. So Frank D said, great Provenance. Who needs Springbank? That was in relation to the Terroir chat.
If only.
Frank D had said, any plans for a single cask version in the future? I think this is in relation to the port cask, is it, Frank? Or maybe in relation to, that was a few minutes ago. So Frank, if you want to clarify on that question, and in the meantime, have you any kind of future single cask releases coming out that might be of interest to us, Morgan?
Yes, yes, we've released single casks. We've sold them directly via ballot. Previous, you know, you can. I mean, I'm not here to pitch signing to our newsletter, but you can sign up to our newsletter and you can hear about things like that before they come out. You just do it on the website, follow whatever the instructions are. I'm sure it's in your face when you go on the website. That's the one thing you can hear about single casks. But yeah, we've got some things in the pipeline. There's been questions. One day, with any luck, we'll be doing, one day, touch wood, be doing a bottling single cask potentially through the whiskey shop. You know, there might be something. There are conversations happening currently. We're a way off. We're a small distillery with not a great amount of whiskey, so we've got to be very, what's the word? Not tactful, strategic with what and where and how we do these things. But yeah, there are things in the pipeline to have single cask releases through trade, as well as direct from our distillery to our customer. Yeah.
Brilliant. Maybe we'll see. You know, we could try and turn it into a W Club exclusive. You know, if the post. Well, Steph and Sir have got a single cast there that they're sharing up to the screen.
Nice.
So yeah, if the sales are good off the back of this, folks, maybe we can turn it into a W Club exclusive, make it really interesting. Ian says, I think the byword through all of this is consistency. Going back to the conversation about the rules coming from the EWG, that is what needs to be adhered to. A consistently good quality product every time, no matter what the process changes or maturation changes that are factored in. I totally agree, Ian. And then onto the tasting of this whiskey. Chris says a creamy peat whiskey, nice. Paul said this is great. Peated whiskey can be overwhelming. The finish is more subtle and smoky. There's yeah, I don't know. I mean, in terms of that distillery on Islay, they obviously do releases that are some of their own barley and some of their imported barley. Do you know if this is one that has particularly had their own barley in there, or you don't know?
No, I know it's not.
Okay.
No, I know it's not. Sadly, that'd be nice, but I think they cherish those casks a lot more strongly than they do their well, I think it's well, giving it away now, but I think it's Mackay Bay casks that we use. But I'm not 100% sure of that. And as I say, it's really important to clarify, this being a public tasting, that we buy casks from them because we like and admire, we like their whiskey, we like them as people, we appreciate what they do. There's a connection between us and Jim Swan and them guys too, obviously. But it's not a collaboration. We're quite clear to make that. One day we might do another distillery's cask finish. We might do another peated whiskey casks finish. It's just a case of, so far we've chosen to use that distillery because we like what they do. But I know that Joe, who you saw the vintage of, I know he's got he loves a peated dram, and I know that some of his favorite distilleries, not naming names, might be in the pipeline in the future too. But again, it wouldn't be a collaboration. It would just be something new for us to try.
Perfect. Nick says, not a peated fan as such, but I could happily drink this, nice and sweet with a smoky finish. This one is just wrong, but it's so right. I don't generally like Islay peated, but I do like Highland peated. So this comes out more like a Highland peated with the Filey Bay spirit smooth. Mel says, malt bread, banana, pecan nuts, lemon sherbet, slight fish smoke house, earthy. Chris says, great idea to peat finish the whiskey. I'm not a peat fan, but this is a great trade-off. Also, usually I'm not a fan of smoky whiskies, but this is a pronounced gentle and sweet finish. So some really great positives there. I'm going to now, folks, stick in the old discount code into the chat. So it's WS24 SY. So Whiskey Shop 24, Spirit of Yorkshire, WS24 SY. That'll give you 15% off all the whiskies we've sample tonight. So you should find them.
And if you what did we say? If you buy more than one bottle, more than one bottle, yeah, you can have a code, and you can come and visit our distillery, visit a centre with a beautiful coffee shop just there. We run the tours 3 times a day. The only thing I'd say with that is, importantly, is when you get the code, don't try and book the tour on our website, because you can't redeem it there. You need to ring up to book, and I'd recommend strongly ringing up to book. As I've said, this is a very, very popular holiday destination where we're located, and the tours are really, really busy. They're filling up more and more every day now. So yeah, ring up to book, explain you've got this code, where you've got the voucher, and then book it in and bring the voucher with you. Yeah, we'd be delighted. If you come on a Monday, generally I might be around, and if you see me, it'd be nice to shake your hands.
Brilliant. So the Paula said, what's the price of the peated? 68. So all of them apart from the first one was slightly cheaper, and the porter is slightly more, but everything else was 68, which I think was about 50 something with pounds with the discount. 15% off 68 is. So it was good. It's good value, I think, for what it is. I mean, I know I personally do. I think a lot of people on this call value that kind of grain to glass story. Terroir or no terroir, I think it's important. Mela said, my guess was WS24 Filey Bay, or FB for Filey Bay. I think, listen, I do try and keep you on toes with that. The Aaron tasting we did last, I know I said 25, a bit of a rogue one. But I think Filey Bay is all the whiskies obviously are all Filey Bay, but if you notice, all the headlines for Digital Drams and everything was Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery. So there was clues there. Russell says, this has been the best collection of whiskies I've had through a Digital Dram session. I've had some really enjoyable ones previously, struggling for an order of best. Well, that is incredibly high praise. So congratulations.
Awesome, yeah.
I think that means more than your gold medal at the San Francisco Spirits Awards.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's you put yourself in front of a load of whiskey drinkers who've been to many tastings with many brands, and you get that sort of feedback. Yeah, absolutely. It genuinely makes a big difference, particularly, you know, people might not realize, I'm sure we all are because we've been so sick of video calls for the last 5 years, but when you don't get that one-on-one interaction, I'm just looking at the back of a phone, and they're very good, delightful to look at Steve here. It's really nice to get that feedback, so thank you. That's some really kind words. Yeah.
No, it's great. Well, this is the point normally at the end of the call, Morgan, where we ask people their favorite of the night. So if you could give your order into the chat, folks, give us your preference. Graham says, can't rank these tonight. Another excellent fantastic night. And when you use night so close together twice, I know you've had a good night. Samuel said, I have drunk the flagship one before, gifted to me, but the other ones, sorry, the chat's moving quicker than I can pop down. Gifted to me, but the other ones have opened my eyes. If I hadn't purchased a new car this morning, I'd be buying all 6. Guess I will settle for 3, says Nick.
Nice.
Well, let us know what kind of car you purchased, Nikki. This is my second Digital Drams and loving them. Thanks to you both for taking the time to give us some depth. Well, you're very welcome, Paul. Please do join some more. We've got another one, folks. While you get your answers in there, sorry to distract from the Spirit of Yorkshire for a second, Morgan, but on Wednesday, I'll go into plan, possibly Thursday. Our next one will be going on sale. It's for next Thursday, so keep your diaries free, and it's with Bunnahabhain. So nice. We'll be from a whiskey finished from a peated Isle cask. We'll be going to a distillery in Ireland that does very little peated whiskey. So but if you want to join yourselves, Morgan, pick up a pack. I'll give you a special price for having been a host on here.
Thank you.
Might send you that one down for free, even. We'll see. We'll be talking about anyway the post-purchase sales and these distillery things, so we can figure something out.
Yeah, that's great.
David says, amazing selection, tough call on preferred lineup, but Claire and Ian have had no such problem. They've gone with 5, 4, 2, 3, 6, and then 1. But says difficult to choose. So that's the porter and then the STR, was it? Those were my 2 favorites as well, I think. I do like the peated one, but mine would probably be 5, 4, 6, 2, 3, 1. We've got, Jeff says, not a bad one here, but the porter wins. Ian says, all these drams are great tonight. The standout would be the porter cask. All the rest are equal. Stefan Sir said 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. So the 4 being, what was that, the STR? Really difficult, but would go STR as well, says Ian. Kirsty says 4, which is STR as well. Great start to the week, being a Monday. The IPA was fantastic. Then a toss-up between the Peated and the Moscatel. Art says 4 as well. 4, 5, 2, 1, 3, 6. So I think it's clear. I'm not going to read them all out because it'll get very boring. There's a couple of other ones. People said Moscatel. People said flagship. I think overall, I think the STR has won it in terms of people's favorite for the night. Any thoughts on that, Morgan?
Probably agree. To be fair, my favorite when we got the gold, there was an almost sense of personal pride for the STR, because that's been my favorite dram of what I would describe as kind of almost our core range, being the finishes as well as the flagship. The STR has been my favorite. I think the porter casks class delightful, but I think STR's more a dram that I'd dram more continually. It's kind of it's genuinely, I've got a lot of open bottles of whiskey, and they're not just Filey Bay for obvious reasons. But STR is a go-to for me as a constant, almost a safe bet. I know it's a great dram. Whereas the things like the porter is more of it's delicious, but it's more of a special occasion. It's the one that I'll get out when I've got, the in-laws round, let's say, this Friday, as a matter of fact.
No, perfect. Well, that makes perfect sense. Well, listen, thank you for your time and for your colleague Steve's help in silently getting the things going in the background there.
No, pleasure.
Appreciate it, and maybe we'll get you on again at some point in the future.
I'd be delighted to. Yeah.
Hope to visit your distillery. We've opened we've a shop in York and a shop in Leeds, neither of which I've actually visited, even though I've been 2.5 years with the whiskey shop. So if I make a trip down there, I'll make sure to pop in to you guys, stick the head in the door.
I'd be delighted to show you around, mate. Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
Right.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I guess you'll, I'll love you and leave you then. In which case,
marvelous. Yeah, no, it's a safe journey home, and yeah, for anyone, who wants to pick up a bottle, WS 24 SY, and the recording will be up there tomorrow, which I suppose doesn't really matter to people on here, but we'll see you again soon. Thanks everyone for joining, and watch out for that Bunnahabhain tasting later this week. Thank you, folks. We hope to see you all again, and enjoy the rest of the Euros and the midsummer. So we'll see you, Morgan.
Cheers, guys. Cheers. Thank you.